Future Friday, all my quilting friends. I hope y'all had a wonderful week and are looking forward to some fun this weekend. If you haven't noticed, we are in a little bit different of a setup than I normally am. Though I am in front of my long arm, it's kind of out here, and I'm actually in front of my ironing board right now. 2 weeks ago, you guys saw me quilt a background fabric, this piece right here, on my long arm with my Butler Robotics system. And we put all these little bubbles in here so we could make a background for an applique. And I realize you guys don't ever see me finish any projects, so we're gonna work on this project together. I have my applique. If y'all remember, it was my handsome unicorn guy here. This is Jagger the unicorn from So Quirky Designs. This is the pattern. This is my version of him. And we're going to get him going. So the first thing I need to do is iron him onto my background fabric. Now, when I assembled the unicorn, I used a double-sided heat and bond to trace out my pieces, fuse my fabric. So he's actually sticky-ish on the back side. It's all heat and bond fabric. So when I lay him out onto my blue fabric, I don't know if you can see the sheen, there's a little bit of sheen back here. So that's gonna get heat activated and he'll stick down to my pretty bubble fabric that we created on our long arm. So I'm just gonna get him kind of lined up here on the fabric, make sure he's a little bit centered. He's gonna go in a big picture frame so he can hang on my wall. So he can be mostly centered. He doesn't have to be perfect. I don't think anything ever has to be perfect, so I don't mind if he's a little off center, but I'll get him close. And this piece of fabric that we quilted with our bubble pattern is just big enough to fit in that frame and be hidden by all the borders. So we're gonna be pretty close here. So I'm gonna make sure all the points of his hair are laid flat, everything is in place. And then I am going to put my applique pressing sheet on top. So I don't know if y'all have ever seen these before. This is the package it comes in. It's called the applique pressing sheet. And when I actually built the unicorn, I built it piece by piece on top of this. And now I'm just gonna lay this over top of him and iron on top of this. That way no sticky things will get on my iron because I don't want to goop up my iron. So we're going to go ahead and just press him down. And we're not ironing, we're not pushing the iron back and forth. We're just slowly moving across the pressing sheet around where the applique is, bit by bit, and putting the weight of the iron on it to activate that fusing of the glue that's on the back of the applique to get it to stick down to our background. And it doesn't have to be completely fused because we're going to applique around that and our stitches are going to hold it in place, but we do want to keep it from moving. I don't want it to slide around on my background as we're stitching it. And I want to make sure I get all of those little wisps of hair and definitely his unicorn horn. So I'm just going to make sure I've got everything covered here. And then I'm going to pull my applique sheet off, and that's going to be really toasty, so watch your fingers. And he is all fused into place. So we're going to go set up our sewing machine and get ready to applique. Hold on. All right, everybody, so I have my sewing machine set up. So we're gonna get to stitching our applique. And most of you may have seen appliques done, either raw edge applique with that straight stitch right around the edge of the applique, or many of you may be familiar with a satin stitch around the edges of the applique to hide the entire edge and give that really clean, polished look. I'm a little bit different, so I do things out of the ordinary, and I actually like to do a blanket stitch or a pin stitch for my appliques. So that's how I have my sewing machine set up. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm going to turn you guys around. So on my machine, it looks like this, and most sewing machines come with a stitch that looks similar to this. So it's going to take stitches going straight, and then it's going to take a dart into the fabric the way I have it lined up. I'm going to show you that I am using a variegated spool of thread. This is a 30 weight quilting thread, and I think it gives a nice look. I'm not going to change my thread throughout. I'm going to do the whole thing in this one particular color. And I do want to make a note that when I applique, I like to use Microtex or sharp needles for my machine. It just gives me a little bit more puncture, really clear around all these little lines. So I've already stitched kind of one row here down the suspender on my unicorn so you guys could see exactly how that looks. And the way it's formed, I've got the straight part of my stitch on the outside edge of my applique, and then the pin part jumping into the applique piece. And I think that gives a really fun and different look. So that's how I'm going to be doing, I'm pretty sure, most of this. Some of the teeny tinier pieces, maybe in his eyes, I might be doing a little differently because those pieces are super tiny. But for the most part, I'll be doing kind of this blanket stitch or pin stitch look. So I am going to just go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn this around so I can go on the other side of his suspender. And what I do is I line my needle up with the outside edge of the suspender, and I can drop my needle down, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, see if I can do this single-handedly. So I've got a needle down button on my machine, so I'm going to line things up and just drop my needle. And see how it's right on the outside of that suspender fabric? I'm going to be able to go ahead and stitch all along as I go, and it's going to take my outside stitches and then take the pin stitch into the suspender. Some of the hints that I was told by people who advised me when I was first learning how to applique was always complete your full stitch if possible. And if you need to adjust the direction your machine's going in, whether you're going around a curve or anything, always make sure you're doing it when your needle's on the outside of your applique. Especially with a stitch like this, if you try to adjust when your needle's on the inside, like if I tried to adjust like this right now, I would end up with a little V instead of that perfect little straight line. So it does take some practice. And I've done quite a few appliques like this, so I have had some practice doing this. I will admit I am not great at satin stitching. The lines tend to get a little wobbly for me, and that annoys me so much. This I'm a little bit more accurate with. I can follow along the edges of the applique better, and I think I personally get a cleaner look doing it this way. And I'm just following along. The suspender kind of goes in a little bit here, so I'm just slightly adjusting my fabric as I go, making sure I adjust when my needle's on the outside of the suspender, not on the inside of the suspender. And now that I'm getting to the end here, I want to make sure I finish on a whole stitch. So I'm going to go in and out, and then I'm going to do my tie off because that is a whole stitch there. So I don't want to create another stitch or it's going to end up going into his collar. I've done my tie off and I have a scissor cut, and now his whole little suspender is done. So I'm going to keep stitching and you guys can watch along for a little bit. I like to stitch in layers, so as the applique is stitched out, I try to start with the bottommost layer and build upon that. So I did the suspender first, and then I did this shoulder line. I also did the little pocket over here, and now I'm going around the shoulder and the bottom as one complete piece to kind of finish the unicorn shirt. I'll do the same thing as I build around the unicorn's face and all the different hair pieces. I'll stitch around the bottommost applique piece first, and then I'll build on top of that. That way I don't have any scary little ends sticking out or applique overlapping. You'll notice I am not speeding through this process. Normally, I am a speed demon when it comes to using my sewing machine, but with applique, I do take my time. I really would like to do it right the first time, and I definitely do not want to pick these stitches out. That would take a long time. I'd rather take my time and be accurate with my stitch placement and get it looking good. Here I am getting to the corner, so I'm going to do a full stitch, and then I'm going to pivot here at my corner so I can then come down the bottom edge. When I'm on a long and straight piece like the bottom edge here, I might go a little bit faster because I know I'm not going to be doing any major curves. But once again, I still try really hard to just go slow and take my time in the applique process. The other thing that's really helpful for me is this particular foot that I have. It's an open toe foot for my machine, but you can see that the edge of this foot right here, if I line that up with the edge of my fabric, that's exactly where my needle's gonna go for the outside of those stitches. That's helping me guide my stitches along and making sure I stay accurate as well. And here we are at the corner again. I'm going to make a full and complete stitch before I pivot. And then I go up the other arm. All right, everybody, we are done with our unicorn project. I know it's been a little different from what we normally do, but I thought I'd show you that you can use your long arm to do something a little bit different sometimes. So we created a background and put our applique on it, and here you can see our friend the unicorn is all done. We've got a great bubble texture in the background. All of our applique stitching is done, and he is going to hang on the wall in my sewing studio now. And one UFO is completed. I guess I'm going to have to go and find another one. So take the time, try something new, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much for joining me. Bye.